Hey everyone, my name's Amy, and today we're going to be talking about a thing called TMAO. This is a special metabolite that is created by our gut microbiomes, and there's a lot of recent research that has been on this topic, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. If at any point you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe. Also, check me out on all of this social media so that you can see daily tips and information about fitness, nutrition, and veganism. Now, let's get started. Alright, so what exactly is TMAO? TMAO, or trimethylamine-n-oxide, is essentially a leftover product from the fermentation of choline or l-carnitine in our gut microbiome. Now, choline and carnitine are two things that are actually primarily found in animal products and not as much found in plants. Now, there's been quite a bit of research recently that has associated higher levels of TMAO found either in our plasma or in our blood with higher risk of certain chronic diseases. How is TMAO made? Well, TMAO, as I mentioned earlier, is made from two specific things: L-carnitine, which is primarily found in meat, or choline, which can be found in a variety of animal products, but primarily egg yolks. L-carnitine, which is an amino acid, and choline, which is essentially a pseudovitamin, both go through multi-step processes to be transformed into a thing called TMA. This then travels to our liver, much like just about every other nutrient we absorb, to be transformed then into TMAO. Now, I could go further into the details of this, but I really don't think you guys want to be part of an organic chemistry class right now. Why is TMAO important? Well, higher levels of TMAO in our blood have been associated with various chronic diseases. According to this meta-analysis, higher levels of TMAO found in a person's plasma were associated with an increased risk of dying from all causes that they recorded in every single study that they included that looked at that. They also did a dose-response analysis on this, essentially finding that for every 10 nanomole increase in TMAO in a person's plasma, they found a 7.6% increase in their risk of dying. Another thing that is associated with higher levels of plasma TMAO is stroke. So, according to this meta-analysis, people who had the highest levels of plasma TMAO had about a 68% increased risk of getting a stroke. They also found that people who had a stroke previously had a higher TMAO level of about 2.2 nanomoles per liter more than people who had never had a stroke. They also did a dose response analysis that found a non-linear dose response where every 5 nanomole per liter increase in TMAO resulted in a 3% increase in stroke risk, whereas a 10 nanomole per liter increase in TMAO resulted in an 8% increase in stroke risk. And this meta-analysis also found that diabetes was associated with higher levels of TMAO. They found a dose response showing that there was a 54% increased risk of getting diabetes for every 5 nanomole per liter increase in plasma TMAO, whereas there was a 13% increased risk in getting diabetes for every 5 nanomole per liter increase in serum TMAO. And overall, they found that people who had higher levels of TMAO were 50% more likely to get diabetes. And finally, this meta-analysis looked at all-cause mortality, or essentially dying from any cause that they could record. And they found that for higher levels of TMAO, there was a 47% increased risk of dying as compared to people who had the lowest levels of TMAO in that study. They also did a dose response analysis and found for every 1 nanomole per liter increase in TMAO, there was a 5% increase in risk. For every 5 nanomole per liter increase in TMAO, there was a 25% increased risk of dying. And for every 10 nanomole per liter increase in TMAO, there was a 57% increased risk of dying. Overall, it's probably not a good idea to have higher levels of TMAO either in your blood or in your plasma. So, what foods increase a person's TMAO levels? Well, the foods that primarily do this are animal products. And there's multiple studies that have stated that it's virtually all kinds of animal products that do this. But the main two are going to be red meat and eggs. So let's quickly look at this study. This was a randomized controlled trial published in the European Heart Journal that specifically looked at a red meat-based diet, a white meat-based diet, and a plant-based diet for how it would affect a person's TMAO levels. They took 113 people, split them into 3 different groups, and had each of those groups go through the 3 different diets at a different point. They also had the groups split up so that they would have some people doing a higher saturated fat version and some people doing a lower saturated fat version to check and see if saturated fat somehow affected TMAO levels. And what they found that was whenever anyone was on the red meat-based diet, they had higher TMAO levels than when they were on a white meat or a plant-based diet. Eggs are another food that can raise a person's TMAO levels, and specifically it's egg yolks. So in this study, they took 6 people and had them come and visit their clinic 6 times. Each time they had the group randomized to have a different amount of egg yolks, ranging from no egg yolks to 6 egg yolks in a meal that they were given. With this, they were able to track their plasma TMAO levels after having the amount of egg yolks they did, and they were able to find that the highest amount of egg yolks eaten resulted in the highest levels of TMAO, though it kind of flattened out after eating about 4 egg yolks. So overall, this shows that choline, which is found in egg yolks, and carnitine, which is found very highly in red meat, are basically the 2 main things that raise TMAO levels even in people. So, what can you do to drop your own TMAO levels? Well, the biggest thing is going to be to avoid the foods that contain the molecules necessary to make it. Or, to put it bluntly, eat fewer animal products or none at all. Since TMAO is created by our gut bacteria, if we don't feed that bacteria, then there won't be the bacteria there to actually create it. And so even if you're eating a primarily plant-based diet, you can still reap benefits of having lower TMAO levels. One study that shows this is this study. They essentially took a group of about 50 omnivores and about 25 vegans, and they all had them do a carnitine challenge test. Basically, they had them all eat steak. I don't know what vegan in their right mind would want to participate in this, but we have it recorded and it at least helps us in our understanding of TMAO a little bit. Well, what this study wound up showing was that when the vegans ate steak, they actually didn't have a rise in their serum TMAO levels, but the omnivores did. Now, you can also get a slightly similar thing with a fecal transplant. This study looked into doing a fecal transplant for about 20 different people who had metabolic syndrome. 10 of them got fecal transplants from vegans, another 10 got a pseudo fecal transplant, essentially back to themselves. And with this, they were able to show that while TMAO levels didn't necessarily change in the weeks afterward, the level of inflammation and essentially the results from having higher TMAO levels went down in the people who got the fecal transplant from the vegans. They also showed that the people who had the transplant had a gut microbiome at the end that looked a lot closer to the vegan's gut microbiome than to the one they had originally. Now, most people probably are not going to be wanting to have to go through a crappy surgery in order to get their gut microbiome to change. So can you change it with just your diet? Why, yes. Yes, you actually can. So this study took people and put them into a couple of different groups, and they had them switch between a vegetarian diet and what was considered a conventional Western diet with a washout period in between. All of the food for all of the participants in this study was provided, so researchers were actually able to track their adherence to the diet that they were specifically to be on for that 1 month. They found that when all the participants followed a vegetarian diet, their plasma TMAO levels were much lower than they were at baseline. And this was even with the occasional consumption of eggs. Imagine what would happen if eggs were not included in that diet. So, lower levels of TMAO, along with other things such as lower cholesterol and lower consumption of saturated fat, are probably some of the reasons why vegetarians and vegans actually have lower risk of getting a heart attack, as seen in the EPIC Oxford study. Alright, so overall, TMAO is not the best thing to be having in your bloodstream. And one of the best ways that you can lower it is by eating a more plant-based diet. Alright, so I hope that you learned something from this video and that you enjoyed it. And I hope that you always remember to love God, eat greens, and get moving. See you in the next video.